what we believe in our church, which is the teaching of the whole Roman Catholic Church and the entire Orthodox Church in the East, and also most of Protestants, is just what I taught you last week, remember? Remember we talked about certain things about the end of the world, right? Jesus is going to come back visibly. He's going to raise the dead. There's going to be a judgment day and a new heaven and a new earth where believers will go, and then eternal damnation for unbelievers. Okay? And I told you last week that we were speaking sequentially, but all that would happen. We looked at the passage in 1 Corinthians 15, as fast as you can blink your eyes, or as a lightning bolt shoots across. Okay? That's it. And the reason I like that, that's pretty simple. I can understand that. This other system gets quite complicated, as you'll see. The other system says, and I'll just do it real quickly, and then we'll look at the chart. Jesus is going to come back, but invisibly. And he's going to come back invisibly and take out of this world all the believers. That's where you say, if in case of rapture, this car will be empty. Okay, so boop, 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 everybody's disappearing all over the place. Okay, and the reason for this, as we'll see, is to avoid, is things are going to get real bad on the earth, and according to this theory, Jesus does this to spare his people suffering. Yeah, well, I wished he would do that before too, but that's another story. So it's a 7-year period, and then we'll talk about that in a moment. Then he comes back visibly. Okay. And when he comes back visibly, he raises all the dead Christians, just the dead Christians. And then he rules the whole earth, right here on this earth, in Jerusalem, for 1,000 years. Now, it's really difficult for me, and I'm not trying to be facetious or nasty, and I'm not the only one that asks this question. It's real hard to understand the real main point of why we have to have Jesus rule on earth for 1,000 years. Why can't we all just go to heaven? The new world. And I can give you answers, but none of them really make sense to me. And then after Christians dominate the earth for 1,000 years, then Satan's going to have a little rebellion at the end, and then that's when there'll be the last day judgment, and then he'll raise the unbelieving dead and send them off to hell. Okay. Well, let's look at these charts, and it's going to take some time. These things are quite complicated. If you're not from a church that does this, you can't imagine how complicated this gets. And they're not even agreed on all the details. So I'm just giving you some of the more popular format. All right? Okay, so let's look at the end times and Revelation. Though Revelation can be difficult to understand because it uses so many symbols, it actually provides a very simple description of the end times as the early Christians noticed. For example, after reading Revelation and the rest of Scripture, the early Christians summarized the end times as follows. Jesus sits at the right hand of God the Father Almighty. From thence he will come to judge the living and the dead. We believe in the resurrection of the body and the life everlasting. In other words, that should give you a hint. In the creeds, which are quite ancient, there's no mention of what? A rapture or a millennium. And these creeds were around very, very early on. How early? 100, 120, 200? Okay. And then the Nicene Creed being finalized in 325. No mention of the rapture, no mention of the millennium in any of the historic creeds. For centuries, this simple summary of the end times, rooted in Revelation, guided Christian teaching. Today, however, false teachers have created many confusing and complex interpretations of Revelation. They have added false doctrines like the rapture and the millennium to Revelation's summary of the end times. As a result, many Christians are confused about what will happen in the future. For a simple, clear understanding of how Revelation differs modern false opinions, study the timeline below, and then look up the biblical references. Well, I don't know how much we're going to do that. We're not going to have time to do all that. You'll have to look them up on your own. First, let's look at the false timeline. Christ's visible earthly life. That's real simple, isn't it? Okay. Then the church age, and who knows how long the church age will be. Then Christ returns what? Secretly. That's going to be a red flag right there, and we're going to see it on the other chart. That's a red flag, secretly. To resurrect or rapture all true Christians. So they're all gone. There aren't any Christians in the world now. Then 7 years of tribulation. Okay, a lot of hard times here. And then the battle of Armageddon, where evil is defeated. And the problem with the Battle of Armageddon in their view, and we'll see this maybe later, the Battle of Armageddon in the book of Revelation is not a military battle. It's spiritual. Right? I mean, there's so many quotes in the Bible. Paul says, our weapons are not of this world. Yeah? Jesus tells the disciple, put away your swords. There's no physical earthly battle. So that's what this is wrong about that too. Okay, so anyway, a physical battle. Then the visible return of Christ to bind Satan and begin the millennium. Now they misunderstand Revelation 20, which we'll look at briefly. Satan is already bound. We're not waiting for him to be bound. He's already bound. And without looking up any Bible passages, when do you think he was bound? Or what period of time? Or in whose life? Christ. Yeah. And we can look up many passages which we may or may not have time for tonight. Satan was bound, restricted with the life and death of Christ. It is finished. Okay, so there's 1,000 years where Christians dominate the earth, and then Satan is released. We talk about this, the little season in Revelation. I'll talk about that later. And then he is defeated. And then the resurrection of the wicked for the final judgment. And then the new heavens and the new earth. Now I'm going to say more, but I'm going to wait till we get to the other one because there's different versions of this. Let's just briefly at one of the timelines that is true. That's the second one. Christ bound Satan, see it there? By his death and resurrection, Jesus has bound or cast out Satan. You can look up the passages on your own. They're underneath there for you to look at. 1,000 years is symbolic. This is the only place that the 1,000-year reign is referred to. Okay? And its symbolism is this. 10 is a symbol for perfection or completion. 10 commandments, for example. 10 times 10 times 10 are 3 tens. What do you suppose 3 is a symbol for? Which we've talked about earlier in another lesson. The Trinity. Okay? So 1,000 is going to be symbolic for complete time. And so the 1,000 years, and the 1,000 years are the same thing as the 3.5 years or the 42 months that's in the book of Revelation. Basically, the 1,000 years is a symbolic number for the entire New Testament period from the first coming of Christ to his second coming. We're in the 1,000 years right now because the 1,000 years is a symbol from the first coming to the second coming, not to be understood literally.